Okay, welcome to another episode of Roll or Die. Today we are going down to the Apple Isle once again. We have for you our friend, black belt head coach of Hobart Martial Arts, Gerry
Ah,
Young.
how you going? Good to meet you. Good
Great.
to see you.
Great to
Thanks
see you
for
too,
joining
man.
us.
Oh, your dog's coming to join the podcast too. What's the dog's name?
Come on, Spoons, quick. In your bed. Quick. In your bed. Good
What's
boy.
the dog's name?
Jasper, but
Jasper.
they're never their names. So Jasper became Jasperoons, and that became Spruce. So Spruce.
The same thing happened with my kids, man. Like, I don't ever want to go down the path of the amount of names that they've had, but yeah, I completely understand, man. All right, but enough about dogs. Let's
Australian culture, we have a nickname culture.
That's right, brother. That's right. So where do we want to start today? First of all, your hair game is very strong, bro. I'm jealous of your hair and your belt.
COVID hair.
COVID hair.
No, I've known you always with that hair, Gerry. Don't lie. I'm pretty sure it's always been around there, hasn't it?
I reckon if you stalk my Facebook, you'd see different eras.
Yeah, right.
Maybe so. Yeah, it's hard to remember a time before COVID, isn't it? So yeah, we can't even remember.
And what it really is my last kind of flirt with having hair. Like it's a little kind of thin there, and it's grey a bit, and so I don't know. I look like Anton soon, but for now I'm sort of doing my best.
It's a challenge, isn't it? Like there is this kind of like as we grow, as we age gracefully or ungracefully. Like I just feel like, okay, at what point do I give up and let it go? Like not my head, yeah, at what point do I just stop caring? Is there a point in time, where I'll, I don't know, stop plucking grey hairs out when I see them or whatever, like who knows, it's a real challenge for me to just decide when do I just give up the resistance to growing older, So,
exactly. It's around the time that you stop competing in adult division.
Okay, well, that's occurring for both of us, I'd say, Anton, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yes.
What's
So
the topic? Oh, sorry, you go, Kim.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, you mentioned about COVID, Gerry, but let's face it, in Tassie, you guys didn't really have a whole lot of restrictions for very long.
It was a funny thing. I remember, I think we were out of business, if you like, for about 3.5 months. There were 3 months, 3.5, something around that. And then, once it started back up, it was bit hard, but it was okay. But I mean, I looked at the situation in Victoria, and it was just hard. I don't know how you guys kept your sanity. And other thing is, I don't know how a lot of you stayed in business. There's not that much room for. There's not that much room before you run out of money.
The government were throwing little tidbits at businesses, but it was such a small amount, it really wasn't enough to keep most of them afloat. I think that with jiu-jitsu clubs, from what I understand, a lot of the members kind of continue paying their membership fees. I think it's come back to that sense of community.
That was hard. A lot of them straight up wanted to. A lot of them didn't. And I had to really think about it because how do you do it? And because it was indefinite, at the time. It's like, I'm asking you to pay me kind of indefinitely, and that's pretty hard. And I remember I sort of said, if you don't want to keep paying, don't. That's fine. If you do, that's wonderful too. And I said to people, you can opt to pay me if you like, and that makes me very happy and makes us all happy, the whole community. But also I said, if you want to pay and then keep it in credit for later or something, you can. But of course, I didn't want to create a hit later either.
Yeah.
So with some people, they opted to pay for a given period of time, and then, for however long the lockdown wound up being, and then they used that credit at a half rate once we opened. So they sort of, once we reopened, they kept paying, but at a half rate for twice as long. And there was things like that. It was difficult too, because I don't know how many other people experienced this, but like, your gym, your payments and stuff are set up on direct debits and whatnot. And a couple of people I know, the companies that ran their direct debits turned them all off, just cancelled them, even though the clients opted to. They just said, well, you're not providing the service that you say you do, so we're not going to do the payments. And I thought, hang on, but you don't get to define what my service is. Like, I mean, because that's how I view, like, if a client, like, or a customer or a student, or what word you want to use, approaches me and says, I want to train, and they pay the membership, I'm not charging them a membership for lessons. Like, charging them a membership to be part of the gym. And it's the gym being there and operating. And truthfully, if Anton doesn't come to class today, that doesn't mean that what he's paying for isn't there. You're paying.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of angry purple belts on the mat getting ready to pick you up next time. That's what you're paying for.
That's true. Space. Yeah.
Yeah, and
it is. And I think also, Gerry, you touched on something else there, that it isn't just about the classes as well within jiu-jitsu. Like, it is sort of that community and that feeling, I suppose, that you get as well. I suppose in a weird way you pay for that as much as you're paying for the classes.
Well, you do. And I mean, there's no, like, Tasmania or Hobart, say, probably there's a lot of smaller clubs and there's some bigger ones like mine. But I'd say call it 10 for argument's sake in Greater Hobart. And there is clubs there's a lot of people who love my classes and really enjoy them. And there's other people who wouldn't enjoy my classes and they prefer to go to a different environment. There's probably 2 or 3 other environments that offer a different kind of training, which, I mean, all the kinds of training that are offered here, I think, are pretty good. Like, I mean, I haven't been to every gym or anything, but I think they're all pretty good. But people who come to me want the vibe that I have. It's actually probably hard to describe, if you know what I mean, what kind of vibe it is. Whereas, like, it's definitely a vibe where everyone's welcome. I'm not one of those gyms where, only the tough survive kind of attitude. Like, I want to bring up everyone if I can.
Yeah.
But, awesome. I mean, but every gym's a bit different in that way. Yeah.
Well, I love that. And I actually, just on the COVID thing, one of my businesses didn't survive. And I lost, personally, I lost about 300K. But and I'm still paying parts of that off. But what I actually got through all of that and how the business has survived, in my view, was that pretty much everything's a conversation in these crisis times. Rent is a conversation, paying bills and the way to pay those bills is a conversation. Everything becomes a conversation. And I think that's how people did survive. They actually did deals with their landlords because the landlords didn't want to lose the tenants, for example, because who's going to take it up anyway? So it all becomes this massive conversation. Tenants to landlords to banks. It's on and on it goes. And I guess I'm still feeling the impacts of it, but it's not necessarily a bad thing. I learned the most valuable $300,000 lesson I could ever learn out of that, so it's like the school of hard knocks, but yeah.
Well, I mean, it's like having my, I've got with jiu-jitsu people get hurt and, I've had a few injuries, but, my shoulder reconstruction is my biggest one. And I honestly don't think I could say that I wouldn't have the same injury again if given the choice. Because I'm a better person for it. Yeah. In a lot of ways.
I hear you.
I just wish it hurt as much,
Absolutely, man. I'm right there with you.
And Gerry, turning the conversation back a bit to jiu-jitsu. So you mentioned about like your classes and your club and things like that. What do you think makes a good club or makes a good class? Like what would you be looking for if you walked in as a student? What do you think?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I was talking to a student the other day about this because, see, in jiu-jitsu, we're all used to this attitude in jiu-jitsu that we love jiu-jitsu, it's a lifestyle, it's a culture, all that sort of stuff. But I was thinking about it, like, granted, I'm not 20 anymore, but honestly, I don't know that I love jiu-jitsu enough to say that I'd be happy in any school. Like, what I see in certain schools, I don't think I'd enjoy. And what I see in other schools, I would love. it really depends on the environment. So what I'm trying to do is create an environment where people can practice the jiu-jitsu they want to practice without, without taking away from the enjoyment of everyone else. And honestly, the only people who don't like the environment that I have, I think, I mean, I'm not going to put words in other people's mouths, but I think the only people who don't really like that environment are people who don't know how to value other people. If someone only wants to put themselves ahead of other people, then they may not like it. Because I do expect that, like, if you're a purple belt in my club, I expect that you will bring up a white belt and help them. And if there's a 12-year-old's kind of coming up into teenage years and they're coming to an adult class now, well, then that means you've got to look after them.
Absolutely.
And it doesn't matter the age or anything else. Everyone needs to respect each other. And if you don't, then you're being selfish. And
I love that. That's awesome, man. That is it. That is a great cultural kind of pillar, if that makes sense.
And you can go a bit further with that too. Like, so the other part of my world is I do hands-on therapy. Like I started with massage, and I go into other things. I practice orthogonomy. I do other hands-on work. And one thing that's taught me is about the importance of safety, like within your nervous system. If you're not safe, if you're in like a trigger response or a fight-flight response, something like that, your capacity to heal, your capacity to stay comfortable, your capacity to learn, all of those things are really limited. And a person who's traumatized or a person who's frightened or whatever else isn't learning. And so I even take that into Muay Thai, into the fighters, they're into their practice. So I'm saying to them, you can spar hard after you've learned. But if you are sparring hard before you learn, then you're in fight flight, you're not learning. You don't learn in fight flight, you only reinforce. And so what are you reinforcing? You're reinforcing your instincts. And if your instincts aren't productive to the fight, then, or whatever it is we're learning, then they're not helping. So how do I foster a safe environment, or an environment where we can, maintain our sort of intellectual sense of self? And does that mean that we don't spar hard? No, we spar very hard. We have good hard rolls. We do really get after it, but I try to build up to that so that you can do it in a conscious state, not in a fight-flight state.
Love it. Powerful, man.
Awesome.
I noticed that obviously you're in a very Zen type environment this morning, and you came into this with your name as Kath Brown, I believe.
Yeah.
All right. So I presume Kath Brown is your partner, and it seems like, and I think you said she's a yoga instructor. So love to know about how you balance out yoga and BJJ. Do you do any yoga? And what about that?
So firstly, Kath Brown, and if anyone's interested, kathbrown.com.au. That couldn't be easier.
Yeah.
So Kath's from Sydney. She's a really experienced yoga teacher. She's as experienced at yoga as I am at jiu-jitsu. And she moved from Sydney to Tassie 2 days before lockdown. So only just managed to get in. And so that meant no more yoga teaching in Sydney, but also no more yoga teaching anywhere. So suddenly the online yoga classes were born, and so we're able to keep working and so on. And this place we're in now is our home we bought in 2020 and didn't settle until 3 months ago. There was everyone in Australia has a real estate story, and this is ours.
Yeah.
But so this room though we set up, this house is shade over 100 years old, and so we had to kind of do a lot of work to get it looking good. Now, this is the studio, so I'm lucky because I get to do a Zoom meeting with you guys in an environment built for it, which is pretty cool.
I like that.
Old mate over here having a sleep and everything. And
I think it's my favorite guest environment so far, for sure.
Very calm. I'm feeling very peaceful. And do you find, Gerry, that because I know they're definitely, I think we've had previously yoga instructors on before and talked about like the link between jiu-jitsu and yoga. How do you find that?
Well, it's an interesting one. I mean, I'm really, 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 really unflexible and really, struggle. So when I first came across the idea of yoga, I was like, I mean, I've done yoga classes for a long time, off and on, but some people have a body that's just built for jiu-jitsu. Like there's a yoga body too. And it's something that Kath and I were discussing. Like there are certain poses that Kath can do that I can't. And it's not because I'm too stiff or inflexible. It's because of that lack of flexibility, I can't align my skeleton. So if your skeleton doesn't align, and this is true for posture and jiu-jitsu as well, for you white belts out there, if you can't align your skeleton, it means your muscles have to work. And so a pose that, say, Kath can hold skeletally or more skeletally, I have to hold muscularly, which you get tension, you start to shake, you get fatigue, and that's not resting, right? So then if we look at the traditional yoga with long stretching poses and all that, I don't even know the different kinds, so I won't throw fancy words about, but all those different things, I mean, I'm not going to get a lot of benefit from that, because the benefit of yoga, as I understand it, and this is what Kat's taught me, is it's not about stretching and pushing, but it's about learning to relax in posture. So there's styles of yoga, like yoga nidra is one of them, and some of the yin styles and so on, where you aren't necessarily actively moving around. You're not even necessarily in that greater sort of stretch ranges. You're sort of in positions that help you to relax, and that's where I find the benefit. And as a side note, there's a tie-in between that practice of yoga and the kind of therapy that Kath does it as well, that we both do with clients, which is called orthobionomy, and that's sort of flies in the face of a lot of the way people treat stuff. Like, I mean, a lot of students will come up to me and say, I've got this sore or whatever, how do I stretch it? And I always say, well, I can teach you to stretch that muscle, but why do you want to? And they say, well, it's sore. And I say, why do you think stretching will fix it? Like, I'm not saying stretching doesn't fix it, but I'm saying, where does this assumption that everything is fixed with a stretch come from? Because generally speaking, if I've got, say, inflammation in the muscle somewhere, it's sore, it's angry, if I stretch it, I'm only going to reinforce that feeling, and your body's not going to let go. So generally speaking, what I do when I'm working with a client is I try to find a way to shorten the muscle down, comfort it, take away any tension that I can, to allow things to unwind in their own way. See, in a similar way to what might happen if you sleep, so your body can let go when you're asleep, that sort of thing. And of course, I do that with clients, but you can do it yourself. Anytime you're uncomfortable after training or whatever, you find a posture to sit that's not uncomfortable, and you rest into it and you relax into it. And so the yoga styles that are beneficial for me follow those patterns. You might look at relaxing positions, that sort of thing. Of course, I'm not looking at doing the splits, so different needs,
Sure. That makes total sense, man. Also, one of the paths we love to go down in these interviews is to find out people's entries into BJJ, like from the very beginning. How did you discover it, and then how did you get bitten by the bug? And just tell us a bit about your journey, please.
Sure, and that it ties into a conversation I had with Neil Campbell, who's one of the black belts at my gym, who you guys know from Melbourne.
Shout out to Neil.
Yeah, he still beats me up all the time too.
The troll father. Does he still troll as much as he used to?
He's much more refined and mature than he was.
A distinguished gentleman.
He's mellowed. Oh my God.
It's good. Him and I get to have a lot of great conversations. He's a real good friend in that way.
His jiu-jitsu is so excellent. I just say, he's always had a knack of just amazing jiu-jitsu. So
yeah,
he's ridiculous. He kills whatever I do, even though he's half my size. It's really good.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So, in answer to your question, the entries to jiu-jitsu, I think, have changed. Like when I started jiu-jitsu, I definitely got into it because I was very much into self-defense and martial arts and that, and I've done a lot of different martial arts in my life, but at the time I was mostly doing Hapkido, which is like Aikido with kickboxing mixed in sort of thing. And of course, being so young and naive as I was like, yeah, well, I got pretty good, stand-up skills. So all I need is a little bit of ground kind of thing, And there was a few scuffles I had in my earlier years where I was on the ground and didn't know what to do. But I didn't really realize that I needed it till later. I found jiu-jitsu like everyone else did. I watched UFC 1 through 5 on VHS, and a guy I know here in Tassie who's never done jiu-jitsu, by the way, but he's a martial arts fan. He found those tapes when he was on holiday in the States in like 92. No, sorry, 2002, somewhere around there. And so I watched them when he brought them around. I was like, wow, that's pretty cool. Didn't think jiu-jitsu was the answer. I just thought that'd be a good little addition to what I do. And it's like Hapkido has a lot of submission in it, like a lot of like joint locks and things. So it seemed like, oh, yeah, I get the same thing. It's just on the ground. And so I got looking around and I rang up a guy in the phone book who did jiu-jitsu, but it turned out it was like traditional jiu-jitsu. But I guess he had a few phone calls of the like. So he just said, nah, you don't want me, you want Adam and Clancy. And so it's Adam Newton and Clancy Roberts. And they were in like a PCYC here. And so I went down there and I got absolutely smashed by those guys. And this is like Adam was a blue belt and in those days. And so that was where my journey started, and I was training ever since then. The reason I guess I talked about Neil, though, is that one thing I notice is different now is that in those days, I started for self-defense reasons, and basically the only other people who were training were bouncers, pretty much. And now people come in, like just the other night, had a new guy come in, wants to start training. I said, cool, what brings you here? And he said, oh, I've just seen the sport online. It looks like a really cool sport and I want to compete in it. And I was like, wow, like you've even heard of it. That's amazing. Like, wow. Like it's like open, it's out there enough that people can come to it from that way. But it's interesting too, though, because, if I go back to how I run my classes, I want a person who wants to compete as their focus to be looked after. I want a person who wants to fight in the cage to be looked after. I want the self-defense people to be looked after. I want the people who are human chess masters to be looked after. So that guy who's coming in to compete, I should be able to look after him, but I want to look after everyone in that way.
Knowing your customer is super important, I guess, and what their intention is. Yeah, I got it.
Absolutely.
So,
yeah.
Gerry, was that around, did you say that's around 2002, 2003? Is that?
Yeah, I was thinking about it. I think I started jiu-jitsu, maybe it was 2001, 2002, somewhere around there. I started. Now, it might surprise a lot of people listening now to know, but I started in 2001 or 2, don't remember which. I got my blue belt in 2007. So
yes. Mine took at least 4 years, and then my blue belt took at least 4 years. It's so good to hear this, man.
Well, because people say, like, oh, yeah, I've been training for a year and a bit, so I'm ready for my blue now. And I sort of think, I won't disagree with that necessarily, because, like I was training with a blue belt. So even the opportunity to get promoted was low. So it took time. I'm not necessarily a very quick learner. There's a lot of things about that were delayed, but it took a long time. Having said that, 2007, I got my blue belt. 2009, I got my purple belt. So it was under 2 years later.
Sorry, Anton, he beat you to it.
Yeah. But then, I was a purple belt for a bit over 3 years and I got a brown belt, but then I was 5 years before I got my black belt. So it's...
Wow, it's such a twisted journey, isn't it?
It's maybe a 16-year journey or something to get my black belt, something like that. I think 16 years. And, lots of different changes in focus in that time as well. And, at times in that I was really keen on competing, other times less so. On that, I am a terrible competitor. I've had some success, but mentally I'm not very good at it. I'm not very good
brother, me too. Preach. I'm right there with you.
Pretty good coach, I think. I think I am. I think I'm a pretty good coach, but I don't, I'm not there's a switch in you that you need to flick when you compete, and I'm not particularly good at flicking it in myself, you know. But I learned that a long time ago that that's not. I'm never going to be a world, national, state, regional, town champ. It's just not going to happen. So,
yeah, I'm with you. But the reason why I still compete is because I am trying to find that switch. You know what I mean? Like I want to actually develop it as a muscle. You know, it's like I'm not going to let this sucker off the hook. Like it's a little dark area of my life that just keeps evading me. Is
it's
what I
a
see
thing.
devote themselves to competition.
There's a lot about competition that's good, like making yourself do those things. Like if I look back across my competitive career, there's a couple of things I've done, techniques, a couple of moves, if you want, that I've pulled off successfully at almost every belt, almost every time I've competed. And if I pulled those off all those times, it means I've pretty well, they're mine. I've pretty much got them. Whereas there's other techniques that I do in the gym, rolling, that I never pull off in a comp. So it's like, there's what you know and what you think you know, or there's your comp game versus your other game. And there's, all of those little things. And, I certainly have flicked the switch. I know I can flick the switch, but I also know that, I'm also, when I say not a competitor and not an athlete, there's also a physical aspect to that. Like my body's a lot more inclined to break than not. So flicking the switch is likely to get hurt, and there's less.
Flicking the switch has an impact. Yeah.
Yes, I know all about that. You mentioned about your shoulder reconstruction. When was that? When did that happen?
The actual reconstruction, that was my right shoulder. I think that happened in 2006-ish. Like, it was a pretty bad dislocation that I had, but it was I had a dislocation that was pretty bad, but it went back in immediately. So it was a little hard to work out what actually happened. And it kept on sort of re-hurting all the time. And that was in like 2004. So it was like 2 years before I got the surgery. And, it was like my arm was fully extended and it broke. I just had it at the front. So like I tore off the long head bicep tendon and I, munched up all the labrum and it was a mess. And so there's pins holding it together and stuff now. And that was bad. But I don't think I'd ever looked into any kind of exercise before that. I don't think I'd ever considered how to do strength training. So I remember my friend Pete, who's a black belt in Tassie now, Pete Rogers, he was one of the first guys in Australia to do kettlebells, like way back when. And he came around after I got out of hospital. I was home, a week after I went in, kind of, and he came around with a little baby 8-kilo kettlebell, and he showed me how to do a swing and said, "This is not a shoulder exercise, but it will help. It's a lightweight. It'll help you stabilize your shoulder." So as soon as I was out of the strap kind of thing, I started swinging and, I got into kettlebells. But that sort of thing I gained from that injury, and I wouldn't have gained it otherwise because I would have just kept plodding along doing my stuff. But I've broken lots of stuff since, and the truth is, I probably could have both of my shoulders reconstructed again now if I let myself. But I'm trying to work around it so I don't need to. But my MRIs are like a horror movie. My joints look like caves full of stalactites.
And you should have brought these on the show, man. That would have been fun. We could have shared them.
It's pretty bad.
Going back to the belt thing, I actually know a brown belt right now who lives in an area where he moved away from Melbourne, and he lives in an area where no one can even grade him because he just smashes everybody, right? So the other thing about this journey, actually even harder than competing for me is getting unattached to belt level. You know what I mean? There's some people who know they're a black belt who are just rocking around with their brown belt because, there's not even anyone to grade them, and it's just not that priority for them. I don't even understand that mindset, right? But I think it's really important that we it's so natural to want to be attached to belt and stripes and everything else. But people like that, inspire me that there's completely different views of jiu-jitsu around belts, man. But what are your thoughts?
Well, look, I've got two answers to that. First answer is it's much easier to be Zen-like and it's not about the belts and that when you're a black belt. Like you get your black belt, it's like, oh, it's not about the belt, If I said it was never about the belt for me, that'd be a bald-faced lie.
Yeah.
Absolutely was. But there's a certain aspect of belts that is logistical. Like, if the brown belt you're talking about, right, he could get a black belt if he focused to get it. It means getting a black belt is about relationships. Like if I promoted someone to black belt, it's not just because they're good at jiu-jitsu. It's because they're a good person, because I trust them, because they trust me. It's a relationship thing.
Yeah.
So if you don't have that, it's hard. But there's like Tasmania is the same as like Australia was a long time ago. It's on its own. It's secluded. Like Adam Newton was my coach, my first coach. He still is my coach. A lot of ways, and so he was flying the flag of Tasmanian Jiu-Jitsu, and that meant getting on a plane, flying to Geelong to go to John Will's Academy, and training there for a week, and then coming back and saying, "Hey, I've learned 3 new things," and then we get to play with those 3 new things, because it certainly wasn't streaming video. It certainly was nothing like that. Or it was looking at books with photos of how the moves worked, and that's like everyone who will know that a photo of 5 photos of a technique does not show you how it works, and so that's a very slow way of learning. And I couldn't get a blue belt until Adam was a purple belt, so he could promote me, kind of thing. And a purple when he was a brown, and so on. And it's like those grading questions are very logistical. I got a second degree the other day, and so a second degree means you can give a black belt, as far as I understand. But I mean, God knows, it depends who you ask. The beauty of jiu-jitsu actually is nobody gets to dictate that to you. Like jiu-jitsu doesn't have an overarching body that's in charge of it. As much as some people think it's called IBJJF, I am registered with IBJJF, but no problem with them. But they're just one body, group bodies. There's no rules on that. But like one of the reasons why you keep getting a new stripe on your black belt is so that you can promote people. And if I didn't have 2 stripes, so I couldn't make a black belt, then I'm not doing my students a service. And if I then didn't have enough stripes to give my black belt student their second stripe so they can promote their student, then I'm doing them a disservice. So it's kind of there is a logistical reason for it.
Never thought about that before. Thank you for sharing that, man. That makes a lot of sense.
It's just part of the structure of things as such, Definitely doesn't make me a better grappler, though.
Oh man, you've been around the traps long enough. I'm sure you got a lot of sneaky, wily old goat moves. That's what I have. Aikido wrist locks. Aikido wrist locks.
Yeah, for sure.
Oh, good. We are nearly out of time, Gerry. That time went really quick. Do you have any parting words, any final thoughts to share with our listeners?
Look, I just want everyone to say good day to everyone and say I hope everyone enjoys their personal journey. I think one thing I noticed has changed a little in jiu-jitsu in the last couple of years, and I don't know if it's good or bad. I'm not a reserved opinion on it, but the big online kind of forum community type things that have developed, Facebook and whatnot, around jiu-jitsu are great in that everyone gets to talk to each other and gets to know each other and all that. But I feel like there's a little danger in there in that I find that there's a bit more dictating of opinion about what jiu-jitsu is across the world. And one of the reasons that I do jiu-jitsu as opposed to just generic grappling, if you like, what reason I like jiu-jitsu is kind of like I said with the belts, there's no right way to do it. It's whatever you want to do and whatever your club wants to do and whatever else, that's what jiu-jitsu is. And like if someone online who's fairly noisy and fairly charismatic and has an opinion starts defining what jiu-jitsu absolutely is, then what they're really saying is this is my opinion about what jiu-jitsu is. And so I guess that's what I tell people, like, don't forget that jiu-jitsu is yours and it's whatever you want it to be. And my students needn't think that I get to define what jiu-jitsu is for them. And I don't think that, my coach Tiago, who you guys know very well, he doesn't define to me what my jiu-jitsu is. Like, it shouldn't be that way. So if you're ever hearing like people telling you what it's about, what the lifestyle is, and what you should feel like as a jiu-jitsu player, don't forget that it's whatever you want to be. There's no definitive truth, I guess.
I love you, man. That is awesome. That is profound, and it's such an amazing note to end on. I really got something for myself in that, man. Thank you so much.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thanks, Anton.
Awesome. So we'll have this out, I think, in a couple of weeks. If you could share it on your platform, that would be awesome to help grow our audience. And we look forward to seeing you. Tiago is back in Brazil now, but hopefully we can see you around the traps, come back to Melbourne, or if we ever come back down there.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Cool. And thanks, Jasper.
Right.
Thanks for coming on the show, Jasper.
kathbrown.com.au. Anybody wants to? Normally we're promoting the jiu-jitsu, but we can do.
And one other thing, Hobart Martial Arts Academy is always open to visitors. I don't charge fees to guests or anything. Just come and roll. I love having guests.
Yep.
It's usually like it. And the other thing too, derwentvalley.com.au. So derwentvalleymartialarts.com.au is my second location. So if you're up in that region of Tassie, which is a beautiful place, it's a small little group, but we're growing too.
Yeah, I've been to your club. It's very good. I can attest. So go join. And thank you once again, Gerry, for giving up your time. And Jasper.
See you, everybody.
See ya.
See ya.
Bye.